All right. I had made a video recently about harvesting bass from ponds for several different reasons. The cooler full of bass came from several different ponds for several different reasons. But I'm making this video in a longer format to address all the comments that I've gotten, dozens if not 100 by now, basically insinuating that I'm stupid for not relocating those bass to another lake. And that's very concerning that we have so many guys that think something that's illegal, because transporting bass is not legal most places. You should not be doing that, and it's illegal for many reasons. And I'm going to break that down, and I'm going to use real life scenarios that I've witnessed over the last 30 years of managing lakes as to why you should not be doing that. All right. So I've got a little list of notes here that they'll try to keep me on track, because I can go on for quite a while about each one of these points. Okay. So the Department of Natural Resources and the fisheries biologists that work in those states made those laws, made it illegal for many reasons. And let's talk about why. Okay. First off, when you buy fish from a fish hatchery, those fish are brought from a pond with, high density, high population of fish, and the higher the population density of fish that you get, the more likely those fish are to have diseases due to suppressed immune systems and parasites due to suppressed immune systems. So the fish hatchery guys, they're pros and they know that. So their lakes are drained and refilled often, right? So the fish aren't there for long periods of time to collect any sorts of diseases or parasites. They're also managed properly to not collect diseases and parasites. And then they're also treated in tanks. It's called deprivation. It allows all the fish to excrete all the waste out, so when they're transported, your water doesn't get dirty. And they're also treated with medicine to kill any diseases and parasites that the fish may have. If you ever go to a fish hatchery, you might notice there's a bucket at the end of the runway or raceway that they're keeping the fish in, or the large tanks. Okay, any fish that have a disease or a parasite usually die within the first day or so of being in those tanks. So they're pulled out and buried and not transported anywhere else. The fish that are lived get that medicine, and that gets rid of the parasites and diseases that they could have. So when you go to a public body of water and pull a fish out and then bring it back to your pond, you're not doing any of that process, okay? So you're directly transporting fish from a public body of water that's virtually guaranteed to have parasites and disease into your pond, all right? Now you've just messed up, all right? You've just introduced microscopic parasites, or nearly microscopic. You can't really see them that well. Into your pond. It's a huge mistake to do that. All right. I see guys do it all the time. I made a living trying to fix ponds where guys did that, because they don't understand that part of the ecosystem. They don't understand how dangerous that is for their pond. All right. It shows a lack of intelligence and a lack of the aquatic environment. All right, pond water is full of bacteria, it's full of parasites, it's full of disease, it's naturally available everywhere. So unless you're really, really careful, you're just transporting, bad things back to your pond or small lake that is going to negatively impact the growth of all the fish in the lake at that point. Okay, so if you see somebody transporting bass back to a pond or a small lake, you need to stop them. All right, you need to tell them, I'm going to call the game warden. You shouldn't be doing that. All right, it's really alarming the number of comments that I've seen just off that one post. All right, let me get off that soapbox and go back to genetics. Everybody wants to talk about fish genetics. Okay, just because a bass is bigger doesn't necessarily mean it has superior genetics. All right. The reason why bass get big is because the balance of the fishery is correct. Okay. Only when the balance of the fishery is correct will you have good bass growth that they can then express their genetic potential. All right. Even if you take a good pond, a new pond that we stock like Sugar Hill Outdoors, Sugar Hill Outdoors playlist is a good place to get all this information wrapped up in an actual job, that we've been doing for the last 2 years now. Okay, we stocked those bass from a hatchery. They were 4 to 5 inches long, and now they're 3 to 5 pounds. Okay, so that's a good real world experience of how fast a bass can grow. All right, so the number one thing, they went past 1 pound so fast in there, they were past 1 pound the first year. And yes, they do have good genetics, but genetics was not the reason why they grew that fast. The reason why they grew that fast is because I stocked them at the proper rate, right? I had low bass per acre. I stocked 40 bass per acre, which is significantly lower than what the book recommends. But I learned this over the years, okay? Bass reproduce just fine on their own. They don't need you putting more fish in there, all right? And you don't understand how many fish a bass eats. If you bring a 5-pound bass from another lake into my pond, let's just forget about the parasites and disease, okay? If that would have happened to my pond, it would have completely ruined the pond, because that 5-pound bass would have eaten everything in the pond. It was bigger, and it would have crushed everything in the pond, and it would have disrupted the balance. So if your pond is full of 1-pound fish, and you're constantly catching 1-pound fish from like 1.0 to 1.9 pounds year after year after year, that's an indication of a balance issue. Those fish are not growing properly. You have too many of them. Because again, go look at my playlist at Sugar Hill Outdoors. Look how fast those fish go to 2 pounds. It just takes them about a year and some change, and I've got 2-pound fish. Right now, my fish are averaging 3.5 pounds in like 25 months after stocking. That's because they're in there at the proper density. And what that means is, since they're not a high bass population, each individual bass gets plenty of forage and grows exceptionally fast. So the first indicator, again, I'm going off of 30 years of field experience in lake management. The first indicator I see when I turn the electrofishing boat on, right, is 1-pound bass, 1-pound bass, 1-pound bass, anywhere from 1 to 1.9 pounds, okay? When a bulk of the fish are in that slot, that's a problem. In a balanced fishery, you'll have a saying, diversity of size wins the prize. When I turn an electrofishing boat on and I'm sampling the fishery and I'm seeing 1 pound, 2 pound, 3 pound, 4 pound, 5 pound, I'm seeing bass in every size class going up, that's an indicator of a healthy, balanced pond. Okay? Now you have a pond that the bass can express their genetic potential because they're consuming enough forage to express that potential. If you don't have a various sizes of bass, if you've got bass all in that 1 pound size class, their genetics don't matter. They're not getting enough forage to grow at the proper rate to express their genetic potential. You could have the greatest genetics, from 20-pound bass. If they're overcrowded, they don't grow, and that genetic potential does not matter. All right? And that is completely lost on the general public. These guys just think you can throw a fish in there and it's going to grow to be, 15 or 20 pounds. All fish grow in all areas. And that's not the way that works at all. And it's showing up in my comment section of these guys who think that they can continue to stock these fish, right? Y'all just take that good fish and put it in that pond. I have literally watched this probably 1,000 times over my career. And when you transport a bass from one lake to another lake or one pond to another pond, all right, the pond that you put it in is not balanced properly. That's why it doesn't have bass in it. Good bass anyway. And I'm going to define a good bass as probably north of 6 pounds. If you don't have the bass at least 5 or 6 pounds pretty quickly, you have a balance issue. Okay? No amount of genetics is going to help you until you correct that balance issue. Okay, and that brings me into, I'm kind of blending the last point together. It disrupts the predator to prey ratio. Okay, what does that mean? You need a certain number of predators and a certain amount of prey for bass to grow correctly. When you start adding bass, especially large 5, 6, 8 pound bass, you're stacking this up and you're decreasing this. It works just like a seesaw. All right, and if you don't know that, If you don't know at least that much, I mean, this is week one stuff in fisheries biology school. This is not advanced stuff, okay? And if you haven't done at least that much research, because it doesn't take very much research on Google to learn this information, okay? This is basic pond management information that's been available for over 50 years. And it's certainly been available online for, the 25 years or so, 30 years the internet's been around. All right. So you've done zero research and looked up nothing if you don't understand these basic principles. Okay. And if you don't understand the most simple principles of fisheries management, you certainly do not need to be stocking fish anywhere, anytime. You need to call a guy like me who went to school and has some experience on how to do it, or you're messing it up. All right. So let's go into some real world scenarios about what I'm talking about. All right. I had a 35-acre lake, and it was one of the first bigger kind of pond / small lakes that I picked up. And this was been, back into the 90s. And that particular place had guys going out to the public reservoir, which was in Georgia. So the public reservoir in Georgia was full of spotted bass. And they brought spotted bass back to the lake and threw them in. All right. That was a huge mistake, because the spotted bass outcompeted the largemouth bass, and they also stunted out at less than one. They had an entire 35-acre lake full of like 10 to 11-inch spotted bass, because somebody kept transporting spots in there and throwing them in there that had no clue about what they were doing. All right. I couldn't fix that. Once you get the spots established in there, you're not getting rid of them. Not with an electrofishing boat, not with a fishing rod. The only way you're fixing that lake is to drain it and restock it. And that lake was terrible. It never produced bass over 1 pound, because the predator, I think it was at this level where the predators were so high and the forage was so low that it couldn't grow bass at all. And that thing stayed full of dinks until, drum roll, it was actually the dam was managed by the Corps of Engineers, and the surrounding suburban area had grown so much that they had to replace the drain system in the lake. They had to completely drain that lake down and get rid of all the fish in the population and start it from scratch. Because while they had it down, they also went in and got the sediment out. They dredged it. The Corps did a real good job, reestablishing the habitat by getting rid of the sediment. But the main part of that job was to drain the lake, to get rid of, or to correct the dam. The fish population is a secondary kind of thing on many public lakes. They're designed for many reasons. Sometimes for power, sometimes for just stormwater retention, and that's what this particular lake was. And it became a flooding issue due to the development in the area. They drained that lake down, right? They got rid of all the fish. There was dead fish in the bottom. The news came out. Everybody had a panic attack because they don't know about what's going on. And it was the absolute best thing they could have ever done for that lake. Within 3 years, that lake was producing 6-pounders. Within 4 years, it was producing 8-pounders. The balance had been reestablished in the system. And we got growth very similar to what we're getting on the Sugar Hill Outdoors pond. I have a playlist for Sugar Hill Outdoors that I've been posting. We've been tracking that live for 2 years. That's a much smaller pond. That's only 2.5 acres. But again, in 25, 26 months after stocking, I've had a few fish go over 5 pounds. So again, I want to try to use real world examples to explain to you guys how bad you're messing up by transporting bass into your pond. You're disrupting the balance of the fishery, and it's really easy to do. It's a very slippery slope. Once you start bringing bass in, they consume so much forage that it doesn't take very long to completely mess it up. And again, I just wanted to do a little bit longer format, use some real world examples. I could go over, again, I could do this 1,000 times. Like, guys are so clueless about how just a few bass can disrupt the balance of the fishery, right? So if you're going and you're moving bass around, you're messing lakes up for trophy bass. If you want to go out and catch, bass that weigh less than 1 pound to maybe 1.5 pounds all day long, which I do not, But think about all the lakes and ponds that you do that in. All right? That's a combination of problems that's been created by catch and release only situations and by transporting bass into those ponds with catch and release only situations. And I'll round this whole thing out because every single one of those small ponds and lakes, every once in a while will kick out 1, 8, 9, 10 pounds. Okay? But it's not a consistent thing. You'll go years and years, or maybe it'll produce 1 or 2 decent fish a year. Okay? And the reason why that happens is there's 1 or 2 fish that just get lucky enough to get enough forage that they can grow past that 1 pound size class. Once they go past that 1 pound size class, they then can consume 1 pound bass. And then they eat those 1 pound meals, right? And that's how they get to that 9, 10 pound size class. And it fools guys every time who don't know what they're looking at because, oh, it threw off a 9.5 pounder. It's a good lake. No, it's not. All right. I've seen 8 to 10 acre ponds, just little bitty ponds that you'll go catch an 8 pounder, a 9 pounder every time you go fishing, right? That is a good balanced system where you get tired of catching 8 pound fish and you really want to catch a 10, right? That is a balanced system that's topped out because it's not enough large forage in it, right? You see the cooler full of 5 pound fish I've got, all right? Because we'll put a fillet knife on a 5 pound fish when they get too many 5 to 6 pounders that's possible to have. And sometimes you got to harvest them, right? And all these concepts are foreign, I know. Nobody talks about this stuff on the internet, I know. I don't have the followers because I'm not telling what, I'm not an echo chamber of nonsense of what these guys want to hear, and I never will be because I know for a fact how to grow a fish. I've been doing it for a long time, and I've never even been fired. You think Clint Tucker's going to fire me from Sugar Hill Outdoors when I grew a 5 pound bass in 25 months? No. Once you show dudes how this works, they never fire you and they become your best friend. They'll fight and argue with you about it until you show them. And that's why I put this job up here so you guys can watch it in real time. I can repeat this over and over and over again. This is easy for me. I've done it plenty of times. It's science. That's what makes science. It's easily repeatable. It's simple math. Basic, right? But it's getting guys to listen and watch and learn how this actually works. That's the challenging part. So please stop transporting bass. If your lake could produce a 9 pounder, it would do it, and it would do it often. The reason why it's not is because it simply can't do it because you don't understand any of these concepts. And neither does most of people online and on socials. All right, they don't get what I'm talking about, and they probably never will. But I'm doing my best, to put out the truth and to help our bass fisheries and the health of our bass fisheries. It's a huge problem, and please share this to anybody who you see transporting fish. You're going to get conflict. You're going to get arguments because they think because they're a bigger group that they're right. All right, that's what's called groupthink. A big group of people who are wrong think they're right because they're a big group of people. They think I'm wrong because I'm in the minority, all right? But I'm not wrong. I'm only repeating what I learned in school and practiced for 30 years growing bass for people. And again, I've never been fired from a job, not one time. When they see what I can do simply by following basic math and doing what I was taught in school, all right, this is simple. It's so simple. It's sad it's so simple. And it's sad that I can't get guys to listen. But thanks for your time. And please, if you have any questions about this, feel free to drop a comment. I try to respond to all the questions. YouTube's kind of a tough place to, sometimes the comments get buried. But I also go live once a week. If you have any questions, you're welcome to join. Just probably want to set the alert because I don't really have a set day. I just kind of work around when I can get it live. So if you just set the alert, the notification bell, that'll help you for when we go live. If you have any questions, please, I'll help you. All right, that's what I'm here for. And just don't listen to the groupthink. Thank you for your time.